The words hung in the opulent air of the living room, a space so meticulously curated it felt more like a museum exhibit than a home. "Clara," Liam said, his voice perfectly level, a calm stone dropping into a turbulent pond, "I want a divorce." Clara, who had been inspecting her manicure under the light of a ridiculously expensive Venetian glass lamp, looked up. A slow, disbelieving smile spread across her face. It was not a smile of amusement, but of utter contempt. Then came the laugh. It wasn't a giggle or a chuckle. It was a full-throated theatrical laugh, honed and perfected at countless charity galas and society dinners. It was a laugh designed to diminish, to crush. It said, "You are divorcing me? How utterly absurd." She thought of their life together, or rather, her life, into which he had been a fortunate addition. She thought of her father's influence, the money that padded their existence, the social standing he had married into. He was Liam, the quiet, moderately successful architect, a nice, stable, but ultimately unremarkable man who had won the lottery by catching her eye. For him to initiate the end was not just a request. It was an act of rebellion so ludicrous it was comical. "A divorce?" she finally managed, wiping a theatrical tear of mirth from her eye. "Oh, Liam, don't be so dramatic. What on earth did I do now? Forget to praise one of your little sketches of a community library? Did my father forget your name again at the club? You can't be serious." Liam did not smile. He did not flinch. He simply stood by the grand marble fireplace, a place he had never felt he belonged, and watched her. He had a simple, worn leather portfolio in his hand, the one she had often mocked as looking like something a student would carry. He held it not as a shield, but as a promise. The audience to this private, brutal play, the portraits of her ancestors on the walls, the cold marble statues in the corners, all seemed to hold their breath. Clara was confident. She held all the cards. What she didn't know was that Liam didn't just have a better hand. He owned the entire casino. Within 1 hour, her laughter would be a distant, bitter memory, replaced by a silence so profound it would echo for the rest of her life. I hope you're settled in for this one. If you can already feel that little spark of righteous anger, that anticipation for justice, go ahead and hit that like button. It really helps the story get out to more people who need to see it. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. Now let's get back to it, because the foundation of this perfect life was about to show its cracks. To understand the depth of Clara's derision, one had to understand the architecture of their marriage. It was a structure built on a faulty foundation, a union of perceived inequality that Liam had, for 5 years, willingly inhabited. They had met at an architectural symposium. Liam was there presenting a small, innovative design for a sustainable urban housing project. He spoke with a quiet passion that was compelling. Clara, daughter of the construction magnate Richard Sterling, was there on a whim, bored and looking for a distraction. She saw Liam not as a peer, but as a curiosity, a talented, handsome man from a world entirely different from her own. He was a novelty. Their courtship had been a whirlwind of her introducing him to her world. He was paraded through exclusive clubs, lavish parties, and weekend trips on the family yacht. To her friends and family, he was Clara's architect. The label was both a description and a dismissal. It implied he was an accessory, another beautiful object she had acquired. Liam, who had grown up in a modest, loving middle-class family, was initially dazzled, not by the wealth, but by Clara herself. He mistook her confidence for strength, her possessiveness for love. He believed she saw the man, not the project. He was wrong. The Sterling family, Clara, her father Richard, her mother Eleanor, and her brother Marcus, operated as a single, cohesive unit of arrogance. Richard was a man whose success had convinced him of his own infallibility. He spoke in pronouncements, not conversations. Eleanor was the gatekeeper of their social standing, a woman whose smile could freeze champagne. Marcus was a weaker, crueler version of his father, coasting on the family name with an unearned swagger. From the moment Liam was introduced, they began the slow, methodical process of sanding him down smoothing away any edges of individuality that didn't fit their world. The first true humiliation, the one that scraped away the veneer of politeness and revealed the rot beneath, happened 6 months into the marriage. It was a Sunday dinner at the Sterling Mansion, a sprawling estate that seemed to sneer at the surrounding countryside. Liam had just won a prestigious regional award for a library he had designed in a low-income neighborhood. It was a project he had poured his soul into, working pro bono, using innovative, cost-effective materials to create a space that was both beautiful and welcoming. He was proud. He brought the framed certificate and a small model of the building, hoping to share his achievement with his new family. He placed the model on the mahogany sideboard. "I just wanted to share some good news," he began, a genuine warmth in his voice. The Westgate Library project won the Civic Trust Award. Richard Sterling didn't even look at it. He was carving a roast with surgical precision. "The what award?" he asked, his tone suggesting the name was too insignificant to register. "The Civic Trust Award," Liam repeated, his smile tightening slightly. "It's for architecture that provides a significant benefit to the community." Marcus snorted into his wine glass. "So, you get a prize for building something in a neighborhood none of us would ever drive through? Is there a bonus for not getting mugged while you were there?" Clara laughed along with him. "A small, sharp betrayal." "Oh, Marcus, be nice," she said, though her eyes were dancing with the same cruel amusement. "He works so hard on his little projects." Little projects. The words were a deliberate sting. Liam's firm, a boutique operation he ran with 2 partners, was successful and respected within its field. But in the Sterling universe, success was measured in square footage and profit margins, not social impact. "It's not little, Clara," Liam said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's going to serve over 10,000 children." Eleanor finally chimed in, her voice like chilled silk. "That's lovely, dear. It's so important to have a hobby you're passionate about." "Richard, the carving is exquisite as always." And just like that, his achievement was reframed. It wasn't a career milestone. It was a quaint hobby, a pastime, like collecting stamps or building ships in a bottle. He looked at Clara, hoping for a flicker of support, a glance that said, "Don't listen to them. I'm proud of you." Instead, she just gave him a little shrug, a silent message. "This is just how they are. Get used to it." He felt a cold knot form in his stomach. That evening, as he drove home, he placed the award in the back seat and never mentioned it again. He also began a new file on his computer in a deeply encrypted folder. The file was named Contingency. Inside, he started a log, documenting every slight, every insult, every moment of casual cruelty. It was the first brick in a wall they could not see. Over the next few years, the humiliations became a regular feature of their life. They were small cuts, 1,000 tiny wounds that were meant to bleed him of his self-worth. At a charity auction, Richard introduced Liam to a business associate as "my daughter's husband. He draws things for a living." When Liam tried to explain his profession, Richard had clapped him on the shoulder and said, "Whatever you say, son. Just don't get any paint on the furniture." The associate had smirked, and Liam was once again relegated to the status of a child playing with crayons. Clara was the silent enabler in all of this. In private, she would sometimes offer a weak apology. "You know how my father is," she'd say. "He's from a different generation," but she never once defended him. She never once stood up and said, "His name is Liam. He is an architect, and you will respect him." Her silence was a form of consent. It told her family that their behavior was acceptable. It told Liam that her comfort was more important than his dignity. The second major incident, the one that solidified his resolve, occurred at the Sterling Foundation's annual gala. It was the pinnacle of the city's social calendar, an event where fortunes were pledged and hierarchies were reinforced. Liam hated it. He hated the performative charity, the false smiles, and the suffocating weight of judgment in the air. This year, Clara had insisted he come. She had a new dress and wanted to be seen. Liam, dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo that he had bought himself, stood by her side as they greeted guests. He was a silent, handsome prop. Midway through the evening, Clara was deep in conversation with a group of her friends when a waiter carrying a tray of champagne flutes stumbled nearby. A few glasses toppled, splashing champagne on the dress of a woman standing near Liam. The woman shrieked. Before anyone could react, Eleanor Sterling glided over, her face a mask of polite concern. She took one look at the scene and then turned to Liam. Her voice, though soft, carried across the immediate area with chilling clarity. "Liam, be a dear and fetch some club soda and a cloth from the staff. Quickly now." He stared at her. It wasn't a request. It was an order. An order given to a subordinate. She hadn't even considered that a staff member might be the appropriate person to handle it. In her eyes, he was the closest thing to help. He saw the flicker of triumph in her eyes. It was a power play in front of her peers. He looked at Clara. She was looking away, pretending to be absorbed in her conversation, her cheeks slightly flushed. She had heard, and she had done nothing. The air crackled with unspoken tension. Everyone was watching him. Would he obey? Would he cause a scene? He felt a surge of cold fury, so intense it was almost clarifying. He could have eviscerated her with a few well-chosen words. He could have turned and walked out. But that wasn't his way. Strategy, not spectacle. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Of course, Eleanor," he said, his voice calm. He turned and walked toward the kitchens, his back straight. As he walked, he could feel their eyes on him, their silent judgment. They saw a defeated man. They had no idea they were looking at a general planning his campaign. Inside the bustling kitchen, he leaned against a cool, stainless steel counter and took a deep breath. The clatter and noise were a relief from the strained silence of the ballroom. He pulled out his phone. He didn't look for a staff member. He opened a secure messaging app and sent a single message to a contact saved as Mr. Thorne. The message was simple. Phase 2. Begin acquisition of Sterling Construction's unsecured debt. He received a reply almost instantly. Acknowledged. It will be done. He put his phone away, found a waiter, and calmly asked for the club soda and a cloth. He returned to the ballroom, handed them to Eleanor with a polite, unreadable smile, and resumed his position by his wife's side. She gave him a brief, grateful glance, relieved he hadn't made a scene. She thought he had chosen to be docile. She didn't realize he had just signed her family's death warrant. He reached into his jacket, and his fingers brushed against the smooth, cool metal of a fountain pen. It was a gift from his first-ever client, a symbol of his own hard-earned success. It grounded him. It reminded him who he was, even when they tried to make him forget. The pen was mightier than the sword, and he was about to prove it was mightier than their fortune, too. The gala continued, a glittering dance on the edge of a volcano, and no one but Liam could feel the ground begin to tremble. The months that followed the gala were a masterclass in quiet warfare. While the Sterlings continued their lives of blissful arrogance, a silent, invisible tide was turning against them. Liam, through his proxy Mr. Thorne, began to consolidate his power. Thorne, a shrewd and utterly loyal financial analyst who had been with Liam since the beginning, executed his instructions with ruthless efficiency. He operated through a web of shell corporations and holding companies, names the Sterlings would never recognize. They bought up the debt Richard had taken on for a risky new development project. They acquired a controlling interest in a logistics company that was essential to Sterling Construction's supply chain. They purchased shares in the bank that held the mortgages on the family's various properties. Every move was silent, precise, and untraceable back to Liam. Liam, meanwhile, played the part of the dutiful husband perfectly. He attended the dinners, smiled at the insults, and continued to work on his little projects. His calm was mistaken for weakness, his silence for surrender. They saw what they wanted to see, a man who knew his place. They had no idea he was meticulously building a cage around them, a cage forged from their own debts and dependencies. The catalyst, the final unforgivable act that moved the timeline from when to now, came on a Tuesday afternoon. It was the cruelest blow because it was aimed not at him, but at his heart. For the past year, Liam had been working on the most important project of his life. It was a design for a new pediatric hospice, a place for terminally ill children to spend their final days in peace and comfort, surrounded by beauty. He had collaborated with doctors, psychologists, and families. He had poured every ounce of his talent and empathy into the design. It was a building made of light and hope, a final, gentle gift. He had submitted the design, under his own name, for the prestigious Pritzker Architecture Prize, the highest honor in his field. He hadn't told anyone, not even Clara. It was a personal validation he sought. On that Tuesday, he received a letter. He had been shortlisted. He was one of 5 finalists in the world. He sat in his home office, the letter in his hand, a feeling of quiet, profound joy washing over him. For a moment, the years of humiliation faded away. This was real. This was his. He decided to tell Clara. Perhaps, he thought, this would finally be something she couldn't diminish, something her family could mock. He found her in the sunroom with her brother, Marcus. They were laughing over something on a tablet. "Clara," he said, holding the letter, "I have some incredible news." She looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "What is it, Liam?" He took a breath. "The design for the hospice. It's been shortlisted for the Pritzker Prize." For a split second, there was a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, maybe even a hint of pride. But it was extinguished almost immediately as she glanced at Marcus. Marcus's face twisted into a sneer. "The what prize?" he asked, mimicking his father perfectly. "Is that another one of your little community service awards?" "It's the highest award in architecture." "Marcus," Liam said, his voice tight. "It's like the Nobel Prize for architects." Marcus burst out laughing. "Oh, I see. And they picked your little death house for kids? How wonderfully morbid. Did you tell them who your father-in-law is?" "I'm sure that helped grease the wheels." The accusation hung in the air, ugly and poisonous. The implication that his success was not his own, but a product of his connection to them. It was their favorite weapon, the one they used to keep him in his place. "My name is the only one on that submission," Liam said, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. "The sterling name has nothing to do with it." "Oh, don't be so naive," Clara said, her voice dripping with condescension. She sided with her brother, as always. "Everyone knows how these things work. It's all about connections. You should be grateful. My father's name probably got your application moved to the top of the pile. You should probably thank him." That was it. That was the moment. The calm he had cultivated for years shattered, not into rage, but into a chilling, absolute clarity. They hadn't just insulted him. They had defiled the one thing that was purely his. They had taken his soul's work and stamped their own grubby, undeserved brand on it. They were incapable of seeing value outside of their own narrow, corrupt worldview. They didn't just underestimate him. They were fundamentally incapable of understanding him. He looked from Clara's smug face to Marcus's sneering one. He saw them for what they were, hollow, brittle things, propped up by money they hadn't earned and a name they didn't deserve. He said nothing. He simply turned, walked back to his office, and closed the door. He sat at his desk and looked at the Pritzker letter. Then he picked up his worn leather portfolio. He opened it, revealing stacks of neatly organized documents, debt certificates, shareholding agreements, corporate ownership papers, all the instruments of their impending destruction. He took out his phone and sent another message to Mr. Thorne. Phase 3. Now, the reply was instantaneous. "Are you certain, Liam? This is the final step. There's no going back." Liam looked at the hospice design, a building meant to bring peace. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that he would never have any peace until this was done. He typed his reply. "I have never been more certain in my life. Prepare the team. Tomorrow morning." Then he stood up and walked into the living room, the portfolio in his hand. The quiet before the storm had ended. The rain was about to begin. He found Clara on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, the incident already forgotten. "Clara," he said, his voice perfectly level, a calm stone dropping into a turbulent pond. "I want a divorce." And that's when she laughed. A laugh that echoed with 5 years of condescension, 5 years of casual cruelty, 5 years of utter, catastrophic blindness. She thought it was the punchline to a joke. She didn't realize it was the prelude to an execution. Her laughter finally subsided, leaving a smug, glittering silence in its wake. "Honestly, Liam," she said, shaking her head as if dealing with a petulant child, "you're going to throw a tantrum and ask for a divorce just because Marcus teased you? Grow up. You're being overly sensitive." Liam watched her, a strange sense of detachment settling over him. It was like observing a specimen under glass. He was no longer a participant in the drama. He was its architect. The emotional wounds they had inflicted over the years had scarred over, leaving something harder and more resolute in their place. "This has nothing to do with being sensitive, Clara," he said, his voice betraying no emotion. "This has to do with finality." "Finality?" She scoffed. "And what are you going to do? Move into a little bachelor pad and design more free libraries? How will you afford it? Don't be ridiculous. You have a wonderful life here. A life I gave you. A life my family provides. Don't forget that." There was again the core of their belief system. He was a dependent, a charity case. Everything he had was a gift from them. The dramatic irony was so thick he could almost taste it. "I haven't forgotten anything," he said softly. He glanced at the ornate clock on the mantelpiece. 10:58 a.m. 2 more minutes. "In fact, I remember every single detail." Her condescending smile began to falter, replaced by a flicker of irritation. His calm was beginning to unnerve her. She was used to him absorbing her barbs with a resigned sigh or a tight-lipped silence. This placid, unreadable stillness was new. It was unnerving. "What is that supposed to mean?" she demanded. "It means that this conversation is nearly over," he said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. He didn't look at it, merely held it in his hand. The clock began to chime the hour. 10 deep, resonant bongs that seemed to count down to a new reality. As the final chime faded, Liam made a call. He didn't say hello. He just said one word. "Now." He ended the call and looked at the grand, arched doorway of the living room. Clara followed his gaze, a confused frown on her face. "Now what? What are you doing? Who was that?" For 30 seconds, the only sound was the ticking of the clock. Then they heard it, the quiet, synchronized crunch of expensive leather shoes on the gravel of the long driveway. It was not one person. It was many. The sound grew closer, then transitioned to the stone steps of the portico. The doorbell rang. Not a frantic, impatient ring, but a single, definitive press. Clara shot Liam an angry look. "Are you expecting someone?" "You know I don't like unannounced visitors." "I do," Liam said. "They're for you. For us." The housekeeper, looking flustered, appeared at the doorway. "Ma'am, there are some people here to see you." "A lot of people? Well, who are they?" Clara snapped. Before the housekeeper could answer, they began to file in. They moved with a silent, coordinated purpose that was both impressive and deeply intimidating. Men and women in impeccably tailored dark suits. They carried sleek, expensive briefcases. They did not look around at the opulent decor with awe. They scanned it with the cool, appraising eyes of assessors. There were 4, then 8, then 12. They arranged themselves in a loose semicircle, facing Liam and Clara. A quiet, formidable wall of corporate power. Finally, 2 more figures entered. The first was Mr. Thorne, a man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. The last was a woman with a sharp, intelligent face who moved to stand slightly ahead of the others. Clara's face, which had cycled through confusion and irritation, now landed on sheer, slack-jawed disbelief. Her smug confidence evaporated like mist in a harsh sun. She looked at the sea of somber faces, the rows of lawyers and financial experts, and then back at Liam, who stood as calmly as before, his worn leather portfolio still in his hand. The laugh she had given him just minutes ago seemed like a memory from another lifetime. Her skin, so perfectly moisturized and cared for, had gone pale, a stark, chalky white that stood out against the vibrant colors of the room. "Liam," she whispered, the single word a breath of fear. "What is this? Who are these people?" The sharp-faced woman stepped forward. "Mrs. Sterling," she said, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth. "My name is Evelyn Reed. I am Mr. Thorne's lead counsel. And I am here to represent my client, Liam Connor. She paused, letting the name land. Her client, not Clara's husband, not Richard Sterling's son-in-law. Her client. It was a redefinition of his identity, the first of many she would witness that day. And these, Evelyn Reed continued, gesturing to the silent assembly behind her, are my colleagues. We have a few matters to discuss with you and your family. Clara stared, speechless. 14 lawyers. 14 lawyers had just walked into her living room on a Wednesday morning. And they were all here for Liam. The sheer, overwhelming absurdity of it was battling with a rising tide of panic in her chest. This wasn't a tantrum. This wasn't a sensitive overreaction. This was something else entirely. This was an invasion. And the man she had dismissed as a harmless, dependent pet was, impossibly, the one leading the charge. The chessboard had been flipped, and she was only just beginning to realize that she had never even been playing the same game. Represent him? Clara finally stammered, her voice a thin, reedy version of its former self. Represent him for what? The divorce. She tried to inject a note of her old scorn into the word, but it came out as a squeak. The idea of one lawyer for a divorce was standard. 14 was an army. Evelyn Reed gave a small, chillingly polite smile. Among other things, she said. She gestured to a lawyer on her left. Mr. Davies is indeed handling the dissolution of the marriage. He has the petition right here. We will be filing for an expedited process on the grounds of irreconcilable differences and emotional cruelty. Mr. Davies, a man who looked like he could find a loophole in the laws of physics, stepped forward and placed a thick document on the polished coffee table. The thud it made was offensively loud in the suddenly silent room. Emotional cruelty? Clara scoffed, a flicker of her old fire returning. That's ridiculous. And we have a prenuptial agreement. My father insisted. You'll find Liam is entitled to very little. She looked at Liam, a desperate plea for him to stop this madness warring with her ingrained arrogance. This was the moment Liam finally spoke again. He stepped forward, placing his worn leather portfolio on the coffee table next to the divorce petition. He opened it. About that prenup, Clara, he said, his voice still unervingly gentle. There's a problem. Ms. Reed took her cue. The prenuptial agreement, Mrs. Sterling, is predicated on the full and honest disclosure of all assets by both parties at the time of signing. We have discovered discrepancies. Another lawyer, a woman with piercing blue eyes, stepped forward. My name is Anya Sharma. I specialize in forensic accounting. According to the documents you signed, your net worth at the time of the marriage included a significant portfolio of stocks and a trust fund valued at approximately $10 million, provided by your father. That's correct, Clara said, her confidence growing slightly. This was familiar territory. Money. Her money. It's all protected. Not exactly, Miss Sharma said, her voice clinical. Our investigation has revealed that the investment company managing that trust, Northwood Ventures, was, at the time, on the verge of insolvency. The stock portfolio was leveraged to a catastrophic degree. In truth, your net worth was not positive. It was, in fact, negative by a considerable margin. Clara stared at her. That's impossible. My father would never. Your father, a new voice cut in, this one belonging to a stern-looking man in his 60s, was propping up the fund with a series of high-risk, short-term loans. My name is George Bell. I represent the consortium that currently holds that debt. The room seemed to tilt. Clara sank back onto the sofa, her hand going to her throat. She looked at Liam, her eyes wide with confusion and a dawning horror. What does any of this have to do with you? Liam met her gaze. No triumph. No, I told you so, just a quiet, profound sadness. Everything, Clara, he said. He slid a document out of his portfolio. It was a share certificate. 3 days before our wedding, an anonymous investor purchased Northwood Ventures, cleared its toxic debts, and recapitalized it with a $50 million cash injection, saving your trust fund from evaporating into nothing. Ms. Reed stepped in to deliver the final blow. That anonymous investor, Mrs. Sterling, was my client, Mr. Liam Connor. He did it as a wedding gift. A gift you were never told about. Therefore, The assets you declared as your own were, in fact, already owned and saved by your future husband. That is considered a material misrepresentation. The prenuptial agreement is null and void. A collective, invisible gasp seemed to suck the air from the room. Clara couldn't process it. Liam? Her Liam? The quiet architect? He had $50 million to just throw at a problem? It didn't make any sense. You're lying, she whispered. Where would Liam get that kind of money? His firm. It's a nice little business, but... Ah, yes. The little business, Mr. Thorne said, speaking for the first time. His voice was gravelly, like stones grinding together. Let's talk about that. He gestured to another pair of lawyers. Mr. Connor's little business, as you call it, is Connor & Associates, a boutique firm registered in this city. It does indeed handle small to medium civic projects. It generates a respectable, but modest, income. It is also a wholly owned subsidiary, a passion project, if you will. He let the phrase hang in the air. Passion project. The exact words Eleanor had used to diminish Liam's work. The echo was deliberate, a perfectly aimed dart. A subsidiary of what? Clara asked, her voice trembling. Thorne smiled, a rare and dangerous sight. A subsidiary of Ethelred Global. The name landed like a bomb. There wasn't a person in that room, or in their entire social circle, who didn't know that name. Ethelred Global was a leviathan, the most innovative, exclusive, and powerful architectural firm on the planet. They didn't just design buildings, they designed cities. Their projects were legendary, their profits astronomical. The founder and chief designer, known only by the pseudonym Ethelred, was a figure of myth, a recluse, a genius who had never been photographed, who never attended awards ceremonies, whose identity was the most closely guarded secret in the world of architecture and finance. Clara shook her head, a frantic, desperate denial. No, Ethelred is. Some old, mysterious billionaire. Howard Hughes type. Everyone knows that. Liam finally looked directly at her, and for the first time, she saw the full, unshielded weight of his intelligence, his power, in his eyes. He reached into his portfolio and pulled out one more thing. It was a fountain pen, the one she'd seen him with 100 times. He uncapped it and signed his name on a blank sheet of paper. Liam Connor. Then, below it, he signed another name. Ethelred. The signatures were identical. I got tired of people wanting to meet the money, and not the man, he said, his voice a soft murmur that was more devastating than any shout. So I created a persona, a quiet, local architect. I wanted to see if someone could love me for the work I do, for the person I am, without the crushing weight of Ethelred. I thought I'd found that person in you. The truth, in all its terrible, world-altering immensity, finally crashed down upon her. The man she had mocked, the man her family had belittled and treated as a subordinate, was not just their equal. He was their god. He was the invisible hand that had been propping up their fragile empire. The money she flaunted, the status she cherished, the very foundation of her identity, was all underwritten by the man she had just laughed at for wanting a divorce. The pale of her skin gave way to a sickly, greenish hue. The room was spinning. 14 lawyers were not an army. They were an honor guard, standing in silent testament to the power of the man she had so catastrophically, so completely underestimated. The silence that followed Liam's revelation was a living entity. It was thick with the ghosts of 5 years of insults, 5 years of smug superiority. Clara stared at the 2 signatures on the paper, her mind refusing to connect them. Liam and Ethelred, the quiet man who sketched libraries and the mythical titan who built skylines. It was impossible. It was a trick. But the 14 lawyers standing in her living room were not a trick. The mountain of documents on her coffee table was not a trick. But why? She finally whispered, the question a fragile wisp of sound. Why would you let us? Why would you let me treat you like that? It was the question of a person who could only see the world through the lens of power and dominance. To have such power and not wield it was, to her, incomprehensible. Liam looked at her, and the sadness in his eyes deepened. Because I loved you, he said, And the simplicity of the statement was the most painful blow of all. I loved the woman I met at the symposium, the one who seemed intrigued by my ideas, not my wallet. I kept waiting for that woman to show up again. I kept waiting for you to defend me, to see me, to choose me over them. Just once he paused. You never did. The sound of a car door slamming outside broke the spell. Moments later, Richard and Eleanor Sterling swept into the room, followed by their son, Marcus. They were loud, indignant, and utterly oblivious. Clara, what in God's name is going on? Richard boomed, his face florid with anger. My assistant said there were a dozen lawyers here. Did this idiot, he jerked his head toward Liam, finally get himself into some real trouble? Marcus smirked. Probably got sued for one of his shacks falling down. I told you he was a liability. They stopped short as they took in the scene. The wall of silent lawyers. Their daughter, looking as if she'd seen a ghost. And Liam, standing at the center of it all, radiating an authority they had never seen. What is this? Eleanor demanded, her eyes narrowing. Liam, what have you done? Before Liam could speak, Evelyn Reed stepped forward. Her presence seemed to command the room's attention. Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Sterling, Jr., she said, her voice cutting through their bluster. Please have a seat. There are several matters we need to address. I'm not sitting anywhere, Richard snarled. And you have no business in my daughter's home. Get out, all of you. Actually, another lawyer interjected, a man with a file in his hand. My name is David Shun. I represent Aspen Holdings, the entity that holds the mortgage on this property. And as of 9:45 a.m. this morning, my client chose not to renew the line of credit that secures it. The loan is now in default. So, technically, this is my client's home. Richard Sterling turned purple. Aspen Holdings? I've never heard of them. My loan is with City Central Bank. Mr. Thorne spoke up, his voice dry. City Central packaged and sold your debt 6 months ago, Richard. Aspen Holdings bought it, along with the mortgages on your Palm Beach condo and your mountain lodge. And who the hell is Aspen Holdings? Marcus demanded. Liam answered this time. He slid another document across the table. It was the Articles of Incorporation for Aspen Holdings, listed as the sole director and owner, Liam Connor. The Sterlings stared at the paper, then at Liam, the cogs of their brains grinding to a halt. The world was not behaving as it should. The power dynamics that had governed their entire lives were inverting before their very eyes. That's not all, Ms. Reed said, her tone relentless. She gestured to another lawyer. Mr. Jacobson represents the majority shareholder of the primary logistics firm your construction company relies on. As of this morning, their contract with Sterling Construction has been terminated for breach of terms. Another lawyer spoke. I represent the board of the Children's Hospital Charity. We are calling an emergency meeting to discuss the immediate removal of Mrs. Eleanor Sterling from her position as chair, following troubling revelations about financial mismanagement. Another. I represent the International Design Guild. We are launching a formal investigation into claims that Sterling Construction has been using substandard materials in several recent projects, a direct violation of international building codes. It was a cascade, an avalanche. Every pillar of their existence, their business, their properties, their social standing, was being dismantled piece by piece with terrifying precision. Each lawyer represented a different cut, a different blow, all orchestrated by the man they had dismissed as inconsequential. Richard Sterling, his face a mask of apoplectic fury, finally rounded on Liam. You did this. You worm. After everything we've done for you, what is it you think you've done for me, Richard? Liam asked, his voice a quiet challenge. Allowed me to marry your daughter? Invited me into your home so you could mock my life's work? Treated me like your personal assistant in public? You have done nothing for me. You have done things to me. And Clara, he looked at his wife, let you. She endorsed it with her silence. This was his list of grievances, delivered not with anger, but with the cold, hard finality of a judge's sentence. My father's name got you that Pritzker nomination. Clara shrieked, clawing for any piece of her shattered reality she could hold on to. You said it yourself. No, Clara, Liam corrected her gently. You said that. You and your brother. You assumed my success must have come from you, because you cannot conceive of a world where you are not the center. The truth is, the Sterling name is utterly unknown to the Pritzker Committee, but they are very, very familiar with the name Ethelred. Marcus, who had been silent until now, finally exploded. So what? So you're some secret rich guy. You deceived us. You lied to my sister. Deceived you. Liam's voice had a dangerous edge for the first time. I presented myself as an architect. I am an architect. I lived a modest life. I pay my share of the bills from the income of my local firm. I never once asked any of you for a single penny. The only deception here was the one you all told yourselves. You invented a narrative about me being a poor, dependent nobody because it made you feel powerful. You are the authors of your own delusion. I just let you write it. He paused, letting the truth of it sink in. This was the moral mirror, and the reflection was hideous. Today, that story ends, Liam stated. The divorce will proceed. You will find, Clara, that with the prenup invalidated, we will be dividing the marital assets. And as the vast majority of those assets, including this house, the cars, and the very money in your bank account, can be traced directly back to my funds, the division will be straightforward. He looked at Richard. Your company is over-leveraged and has just lost its most crucial partner. I suspect it will be bankrupt within a month. Your reputation, he glanced at Eleanor, is about to be shredded in the social circles you value so highly. And you, Marcus, he finished, looking at the stunned young man, will have to find a way to get by without a family name to hide behind. For the first time in your life, you will have to stand on your own. He turned back to Clara, whose face was a mess of tears and disbelief. You laughed, Clara. You laughed when I said I wanted a divorce. You thought I had nothing. You thought I was nothing. He picked up his portfolio and his fountain pen. The truth is, I have everything, and you're about to find out what it feels like to have nothing. He turned to Ms. Reed. I believe we are done here. With that, he walked toward the door. The 14 lawyers fell into formation behind him, a silent, dark river flowing out of the house. Liam didn't look back. He didn't need to. He could feel the weight of their ruin behind him. He had not shouted. He had not sought revenge. He had simply demanded justice. And justice, he was discovering, was a quiet, methodical, and utterly devastating thing. The aftermath was not swift and cinematic. It was a slow, grinding erosion, far more brutal than a sudden collapse. In the days and weeks that followed that cataclysmic morning, the Sterlings found themselves in a new and terrifying reality. The world they had commanded no longer answered their calls. Richard Sterling tried to fight back. He called his old contacts at the banks, his allies in the construction industry, the politicians he had donated to for years. He found only disconnected lines and polite but firm refusals. The news that his company's finances were a house of cards and that he had drawn the ire of the mythical Ethelred spread through the city's elite like a virus. No one wanted to be associated with him. No one would extend him a line of credit. His desperate attempts to find new logistics partners failed. Within 3 weeks, just as Liam had predicted, Sterling Construction, a 50-year-old family legacy, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Richard, a man who had never known failure, was broken. He spent his days in a whiskey-fueled haze, staring at the ruins of his empire. Eleanor's fall was, in its own way, more complete. Her power had been social, a currency of influence and exclusion. The emergency meeting of the Children's Hospital Charity Board was a massacre. The evidence of her using foundation funds for personal expenses, a practice she had long considered a perk of the job, was laid bare by Liam's forensic accountants. She was stripped of her chairmanship in a humiliating public vote. Her friends, the women she had lunched and gossiped with for decades, suddenly stopped returning her calls. Invitations dried up. She, who had been the gatekeeper of society, found herself locked outside the gates, her name now a synonym for scandal. Marcus, stripped of his trust fund and the prestigious title of vice president at his father's company, was utterly lost. He tried to get a job based on his resume, only to discover that VP at Sterling Construction now meant less than nothing. His arrogance, which had been mistaken for confidence when backed by family money, was now seen for what it was, an ugly, abrasive personality. He was forced to sell his sports car and move into a small apartment, facing a future he was completely unprepared for. And Clara was at the center of the storm. The divorce proceedings were a grim, relentless march. Her legal team, hired with what little money she could scrape together, was hopelessly outmatched by Liam's formidable counsel. Mr. Davies methodically dismantled her life, proving with impeccable documentation that everything she considered hers was, in fact, his. The house, the art, the jewelry, all purchased with funds flowing from Ethelred Global's accounts into Liam's modest, local firm, then into their joint accounts. One evening, about a month into the proceedings, she showed up at the small, elegant downtown apartment Liam had moved into. It was raining, and she looked like a wraith, her expensive clothes soaked, her makeup running. She had been crying. "Liam, please," she begged when he opened the door. "You have to stop this." Liam didn't invite her in. He simply stood in the doorway, a barrier between his new life and the wreckage of his old one. "There's nothing to stop, Clara. It's a legal process." "A legal process you started," she cried, her voice raw. "You've destroyed my family. My father, he's a ghost. My mother won't leave her room. You've taken everything." "I haven't taken anything that wasn't already mine, Clara," he said, his voice devoid of malice. "I'm simply taking it back. The money, the assets, they were never yours. They were a loan, a test, and you all failed. It was a trap," she accused. "You set us up. You deceived us from the beginning." "Was it a trap to live humbly?" he countered, his voice quiet but unyielding. "Was it a trap to be a good husband? To love you? The only trap was your own prejudice. You and your family judged me based on a set of superficial values, money, status, connections. You never once bothered to look deeper, to see the person who was right in front of you. This isn't my fault, Clara. This is the consequence of your choices." She finally broke down, her anger collapsing into desperate sobs. "What am I supposed to do? I have nothing. I don't know how to do anything." For the first time, Liam felt a flicker of the old pity he used to feel for her. He saw not the arrogant socialite, but a lost, frightened woman who had been so sheltered by her privilege that she was now like a hothouse flower exposed to a blizzard. But pity was not love, and it was not a reason to stop. He gave her a choice. It was the last test, the last chance for her to show a shred of integrity. "I will not be cruel," he said. "Ms. Reed has prepared 2 settlement offers. The first is a protracted legal battle. My team will fight you over every single asset. It will take years. It will drain you emotionally and financially. You will lose. You will walk away with absolutely nothing but your legal bills." He paused, letting the grim reality of that sink in. "The second offer," he continued, "is this. You agree to a clean, swift, uncontested divorce. You sign everything over. In return, I will set up a trust for you. It won't be enough to fund a life of luxury. There will be no more galas or yachts, but it will be enough to live on. Enough to get an apartment, go back to school, learn a skill, build a life of your own. A real life. The choice is yours, Clara. You can cling to the pride that destroyed you, or you can choose to have a future." She stared at him, her tear-streaked face a battleground of emotions. Rage at her loss, humiliation at her circumstances, and a tiny, flickering ember of self-preservation. For days, she consulted with her lawyers, who advised her to fight, smelling years of billable hours. She spoke to her broken father, who urged her to take Liam for everything he was worth, still blind to the new reality. But in the end, alone in the echoing, empty mansion that was no longer hers, she looked in the mirror and saw a stranger. She saw a woman whose entire identity had been a construct, a brand built by her family and underwritten by her husband. Stripped of those things, who was she? She didn't know. And for the first time, that question scared her more than poverty. 2 weeks later, she signed the papers. She took the second offer. She chose a future. It was the first decision she had ever truly made for herself, untethered from the expectations of her family or the pursuit of status. It was a small, painful, but necessary step into the real world. The final resolution was not a moment, but a season of change. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, the name Sterling had all but vanished from the city's lexicon. The mansion was sold to a tech billionaire. The society pages were filled with new names, new faces. The world had moved on, as it always does. Liam, however, did not simply return to being the reclusive Ethelred. The experience had changed him too. He had gone into his self-imposed exile, seeking a truth about love, and had instead found a harsher truth about human nature. But it hadn't made him bitter. It had made him focused. He stepped out from behind the pseudonym. In a move that shocked the architectural and financial worlds, Ethelred Global announced that its founder, Ethelred, was in fact Liam Connor. He gave a single, extensive interview to a respected journal, explaining his reasons with quiet candor. He didn't mention the Sterlings by name. He spoke only of a desire to be seen for his work, not his wealth, and the lessons he had learned about integrity and perception. The story made him even more of a legend. But he channeled that fame not into building more monuments to commerce, but into the work that truly mattered to him. He fully funded the construction of the pediatric hospice, overseeing every detail himself. The project, once it was known to be the work of the great Ethelred, received global attention. It won the Pritzker Prize. At the awards ceremony, Liam accepted the honor himself. He didn't speak about the complex design or the innovative materials. He spoke about the children the building would serve. He spoke about dignity, comfort, and the responsibility of architects to create spaces that serve humanity. He was no longer just a brilliant designer. He was a moral voice in his field. One crisp autumn afternoon, a year after the divorce, Liam was visiting the nearly completed hospice. The building was breathtaking, a structure of wood and glass that seemed to float among the trees, catching the golden afternoon light. It felt peaceful, sacred. As he was walking the grounds, he saw a woman sitting on a bench in the public garden that bordered the property. She was sketching in a notepad. She wore simple clothes, and her hair was tied back without any particular style. It took him a moment to recognize her. It was Clara. She hadn't seen him. She was focused on her drawing, a surprisingly good rendering of the hospice's main wing. She looked different. The hard, brittle edge of the society wife was gone. The perpetual mask of judgment and appraisal had been replaced by a look of quiet concentration. There was a stillness about her that Liam had never seen before. He considered walking over, saying something, but what was there to say? Their story was over. He had won, but standing there, watching her, it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a tragedy with a necessary ending. He had wanted justice, and he had gotten it. She and her family had faced the direct consequences of their actions. Poetic justice had been served, but the cost had been 5 years of his life and the death of the love he had once believed in. He turned and walked away without a word. He had his work, his integrity, and his peace. That had to be enough. Later that week, he received a small package at his office. There were no return address. Inside was the sketchbook he had seen her with. It was filled with drawings of his buildings around the city, the library, a small park pavilion, and dozens of the hospice from every angle. On the final page, there was a note. It wasn't an apology, not in words. An apology from her now would be meaningless, self-serving. It was just 3 words, written in a simple, unadorned script. I see it now. Liam closed the book. He understood. She wasn't just seeing the buildings. She was seeing the work, the passion, the soul he had poured into them. She was seeing him for the first time long after it mattered. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was perhaps the beginning of understanding. And for a man who had spent 5 years being invisible, it was a quiet, unexpected grace note at the end of a painful symphony. He put the sketchbook on his shelf, not as a trophy of his victory, but as a reminder that true worth is not in what you own or who you know, but in what you create and the integrity with which you live. It's a lesson some people, like the Sterlings, are forced to learn the hard way, and a lesson he, through it all, had managed to hold on to. And that's the end of our story. It's a powerful reminder that respect can't be demanded or bought. It has to be earned through character and action. The loudest voice in a room isn't always the most powerful. What did you think of Liam's final choice to walk away? Was it the right one? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective is what makes this community so special. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more tales of justice and redemption. Thank you for being here, and until next time, remember to value the quiet strength in yourself and others.